coming up on this episode of the Awake and Aware podcast.
Yeah. How do you think they caught on to it off the bat?
I know exactly how they caught on to it. I went down and had a meeting with somebody in the US and they were following him. So then they just followed me. Once they got me back up into Canada, they had agents on both sides of the border. They followed. They seen who I was talking to, and it was all mapped out.
You sort of gained your platform from the TV series Married at First Sight. I know it's something what sort of lingers around.
They didn't know about my story on MAFS. I mean, it's a year down the track now. The new ones have started, so the new bunch of victims are up to the chopping block. Yeah. It's like when you're driving through Melbourne. Melbourne's got a weird system that that livestock have got to go through the city, and while you're sitting at the lights, you're looking at all these cows, and you know the poor buggers are off to slaughter.
Yeah,
that's what I see when I see teasers of maps.
Welcome back to the Awake and Aware podcast. Today we're coming in for number 8. Super exciting one today. We're having a guest on today who's been he's been killing life lately. A lot of you guys would know him from the TV series Married at First Sight. But now he's a big advocate for mental health and does all these amazing things around his space. And just trying to encourage people to live a better and healthier life. So, without further ado, Tim Smith, thank you.
Thanks,
for
Lockie.
coming in today, mate.
Appreciate it.
It's I know you and I have been in contact the past month or so, and
we have. Yep.
It's been refreshing. It's been exciting. It's been all good things, really. So I guess thanks for
worries,
coming up, mate.
Look, you know, I've watched your podcast, so I love what you're doing. I love the message you're trying to put out, and yeah, I think the more we talk about it, the more people do it or understand it, the better we'll be.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree anymore.
Yeah.
Now, you sort of gained your platform from the TV series Married at First Sight. I know it's something what sort of lingers around. It's probably something we won't go too deep into today, just because I know that's behind you, and you know the show was great for getting where you are. But I think your story is a lot deeper than just being.
Because they didn't know about my story on MAFS. Yeah. No. And I mean, it's a year down the track now. The new ones have started, so the new bunch of victims are up to the chopping block.
Yeah, they're we'll be seeing a few more roll in just through over. Hey,
Jesus Christ! It's like when you're driving through Melbourne, because Melbourne's got a weird system that that livestock have got to go through the city, and while you're sitting at the lights, you're looking at all these cows, and you know the poor buggers are off to slaughter.
Yeah,
that's what I see when I see teasers of maps.
That's a pretty good analogy. I never really thought about it like that. Eh?
It's like you watch the little clips from TikTok of the wedding. It's like off to the slaughterhouse.
Off to the slaughterhouse.
They'll be at the slaughterhouse next week for the first dinner party.
Well, and we'll be seeing that in the next 6 months. So, looking forward to seeing the next rolling through. But, like I said, your story is a lot deeper than just being a participant on a reality show. So I guess to start off with the podcast, take us back to early days of Tim Smith, the growing up, the family life,
Yeah, well, I grew up in central Queensland, so in a little mining town in the middle of nowhere. It was a good place to grow up. Mm-hmm. A small town. I can't say there was a lot of opportunity, but I wasn't that smart either. I definitely wasn't very smart at school. I can say that school was mostly the worst part of growing up. Was between 9 and 3. I absolutely hated it. I wasn't good at it. Bullying, I was bullied, and it was just, school was hell. Like, it was hell. And I left at 14 and a half. I wasn't even 15 when I left. I'd had an incident with a teacher, and the old man went up to the school, and then he came back and said, look, you don't ever have to go back. Like, that's it. So I started the next day digging holes.
Wow.
That was my job, was to dig holes for footings with a shovel.
Started young, hey?
I thought the old man was just doing that to go, after a week I'd sort of go, I think school's better, but I continued to dig holes.
Yeah.
I was, yeah.
What was the, coming through some school, what was the worst part about it? Was it the subject? Was it the peers? Was it the teachers?
I had dyslexia back then, and you're going back a lot of years. They didn't understand what dyslexia was, and if you just didn't keep up with the class, you just got left behind. And the teachers were absolutely awful. So any of my school teachers looking at, that are watching this podcast, I can openly say you're a bunch of fuckwits. And I hope you actually left your jobs shortly after, because there's not one of you that's worth fucking jack shit. You should have never been teachers, you pricks. Does that make it as clear as possible?
Yeah. I can sort of relate. Even me coming through school, I wasn't, man. I was the quite opposite of a golden child through school. Even, like you said, being bullied. I was being bullied. I bullied. I did all that sort of stuff, and the subjects, the mathematics was horrible. The only decent subjects I was in was English. And how was, you said you had a bit of dyslexia. How did that affect your, upbringing through school? Was it just completely brutality?
Just brutal. Absolutely brutal. I mean, I left school. Yeah, I left school and was, it was, like I said, dyslexia. And it's a real weird, it's a really weird thing that, you look at life now and I can read and understand things. I don't have a pilot's license, but I'm sitting through some stuff right now. And today you can just absorb so much information, where back then it was, if you didn't know what X, Y, Z times PQR equals, and what fucking sense was that anyway? If you look at all the shit that we learnt, and even I understand weather patterns, obviously with flying and stuff, that when you're sitting in a classroom and they're presenting it in such a shit way that kids like me just wouldn't absorb it. But today, I wouldn't say I'm fine, but definitely I read a bit and I understand everything. And when I want to learn a new subject or whatever, I can do it. But it wasn't my time back then, and it led to a really difficult time.
Yeah, I can understand that, man. When do you think the pivot shifted with dyslexia? Was it just an ongoing bit of learning, studying, etc.? Yeah,
I think I think because of that suppression with people telling you're not good, or you're stupid. Even the teachers say you're just stupid. Everyone can get it. You can't get it. So I think once I'd left school. And there's a whole different thing that you've got to learn when you leave school, which is social skills. And I can't say I was that popular in that town, even though I really do like the town and I appreciate growing up in there. I wasn't an athlete or anything. And my sport of choice when I left school, I was still 15, is I went and raced BMX. And I think that gave me some confidence because I was really good at it. And it just gave me some confidence. I got to travel around with it, and I got to meet a lot of different people. And those social skills actually have what's helped me through life more than academics. Social skills and that ability to meet people and talk about anything or any subject has been more valuable than anything. It's making those connections.
Yeah, I agree, man. Coming out, especially sitting in this space here in the podcast, I've even noticed the communication skills and the level of language. It stretches a lot further than what I learned in school. So I think I think for the most part, the most amount of learning you do is when you leave school, in all areas, whether it be even academically or even socially, emotionally even. And when you were coming through your little town, whereabouts was that town?
It's a place called Maris. It's about 2 hours west of Rockhampton.
Okay.
Little mining town up in central Queensland.
What was the population back then?
About 600.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Small town, eh?
Yeah, really small town. Yeah. Might have been a bit more. Might have been 1,000. Because I thought there was a couple of hundred kids. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What was the the community like there? Was it always, brother in arms or, sister in arms, or
Yeah.
was it sort of spread out?
No, the community was good. I mean, everyone's dad worked at the mine. Everyone's mums were pretty much stay at home, and we all went to school. So it was just really structured in that sense that nobody really went outside. The main sport in the town was football, and we all holidayed somewhere between Rockhampton and Tenham Sands. Yeah, if somebody came to the Gold Coast, it's like they flew to the moon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. For school, I mean, for their holidays. So yeah, it was all pretty much the same.
Yeah, right. And sort of coming through, your childhood, coming through dyslexia and all that sort of stuff. You said you left school at 15. What was the sort of life goals you had at that time? Where did you want to see yourself, progress?
I've always, just growing up in that area, it's hot, dry, arid. The main thing we could do when we grew up was watch movies, and I think BMX Bandits came out, and that was one of Nicole Kidman's first movies.
Yeah, right.
You wouldn't know. It came out in
Probably
like
a little bit past my time, eh?
I reckon it would have been early 80s.
Oh, yeah, no. Definitely before my time.
And so that's how I got into BMX, is I watched that movie. I was fascinated with it. It was set in Manly in Sydney, and I ended up getting into BMX, which BMX was really good for me because I got to travel around, meet people, and those social skills. But I always sort of would go back to the town periodically because that's where mum and dad were. But I always wanted to go to America. So I got a job in a coal mine, in the mine for, 6 months when I was 17, maybe. And by the time I was just over 18, I bought a ticket and went to LA.
What was the mindset coming into that? Did that opportunity come up and you were like, fuck, yeah? Or was it sort of a bit of optimism? What was the response from your family when you made that move?
I'd sort of been coming down to Brisbane a little bit and travelling all around, so it wasn't a big thing. And I'd only planned on going to America for about 6 weeks and end up being away for a year and a half. I sort of said to Mum, look, I'm going to go on a 6-week tour around America and possibly Canada, and I'll be home in 6 weeks. Well, yeah, that didn't happen. I came back a year and a half later, and that was the beginning of really opening up my eyes that there's a whole big world out there.
Yeah, I can agree. Yeah, the world around us is so far stretched, eh? And if you don't, if you stay in the comfortability of your own, contentment, you're not going to survive or even, learn and grow and develop as a human, right?
Right.
So, when you went to LA, did you already have the job offer? You said you're going to the coal mine. Walk me through that.
Well, I got this job in the coal mine. It was only for a very short time. It was the first time they'd ever had the locals getting a job with a contractor in the mine. So I did that contract for about 6 months, which gave me enough money to travel, and that's exactly what I did. The minute that was over, I jumped on and traveled. But I thought traveling was going to be six weeks, but I sort of enjoyed it that much that I just stayed doing it. And I worked illegally in different countries, normal illegal stuff, like, just jobs as like a TA, or I got a job, I'm not going to say which, as a truck driver for a brewery in another country, could have been England. And I was actually a school teacher there once too.
Mate, you're a jack of all trades, bud. I
was a school teacher for a couple of days. Yeah.
What was that like? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's a long story.
Yeah,
it's faking up. I always faked paperwork up. It's really, because back then you got to think there was no internet back then.
Yeah.
There was no internet. There was no iPhones. When you're doctoring up a certificate, you're cutting stuff out, and then you're sticking it onto a paper, then you're photocopying, and then you're photocopying that paper. You go, I got my certificate, and it's like, it's not worth jack shit.
What subjects were you teaching?
Oh, I had a mate that just laid it all out, and and it was just like second graders. Yeah.
Oh, mate. I think if that was me, I wouldn't be able to contain it. I would have just been laughing the whole time, hey?
Oh, well, I got a job as a truck driver, and I never had a truck license. And each day they said, oh, we'll bring your license in, and then that would get delayed for about a week. And I stayed a truck driver for about 6 weeks until in the end they said you can't work anymore unless you bring your license in. Well, I never had one, so that was my last day at work there. And I never had a work permit for that country either, so...
Is this America still?
No, that'd be England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at England, hey?
Yeah.
That is hilarious. So when you left England...
Yeah.
And you went back to America. What was the trajectory there?
Yeah, I went back to America, and by then I'd applied for a work permit for Canada and went up into got back to America, had a little bit of a look around, then I went up into Canada, and got a job in a restaurant there, and then I ended up getting a job as a builder for about 12 months, and that. I had a good time. It gave me another taste of living abroad, and from where I come from, it's so different that I really did enjoy it. And then when all my permits and everything ran out, and I hadn't seen the family in a while, I came home.
Was there any period of time of like feeling homesick or anything like that?
I actually don't think. It was really weird. I don't think I felt homesick at that period of my life. And there was never, and again, it's a very weird concept to think today that I mightn't hear from my folks for a month and a half. There's no email, no cell phones, no FaceTime. I just phone and say, hey, I made my way to England. And I thought you were going to be in America. Yeah, I got a cheap ticket, so I thought I'd come to England. So I didn't get homesick. I came home and I brought a girl with me, my wife. Well, she was my wife at the time, but we came back to Australia. And we're here for mostly 2 years, and I really did miss North America at that point. Mm-hmm. And her family was quite old. Her parents were really old, and she just wanted, and mine were really young, and she wanted to move back to spend some time with them before they passed on.
Before going over to the States and Canada, do you think when you were growing up, because you had that negative experience within schooling and working in Australia, do you think you felt like there was something more to your life that you wanted to explore?
Oh, definitely. I always thought there was more to life in general. I was never... I enjoyed growing up in that town, but I was never in love with it. And I lived my life through movies, just seeing how other people lives. I always found it fascinating, and I guess not having... Look, I had mates there, but I just wanted more. I wanted more than Central Queensland had to offer. Yeah.
Was there any ideologies of doing anything else other than, being in the mining town?
Look, I applied for the Air Force. That was a real pivotal point. Mm-hmm. I applied for the Air Force when I was 15, so I was still digging holes. Mm-hmm. We actually had a really bad mining disaster in Mara, and about 12 people died. And I remember all the helicopters come flying into town. And in a small town, they just park in the main street. There's a little strip of grass, and I remember the Channel 7 chopper came in and landed, and there was about 3 of them there. I remember walking around and going, it looked like a spaceship had landed in a small town. It was weird. I remember me and Wayne Elliott were just dragging our hands around this chopper. I thought, geez, that's pretty cool. So I thought I'll apply for the Air Force. Maybe So I filled out the application for the Air Force, put my last report card in there and sent it off, and they sent me back a reply letter and said I could be a postman or a cleaner. So they wouldn't even let me put air in the tyres like of an aircraft. They figured I didn't even have the aptitude to go, yep, there's 75 pounds in that tyre. So that was real disheartening. Applied for the army, and I couldn't even get in there. That's how stupid I was.
Really?
Yeah. I wasn't the smartest. I was not the sharpest tool in the shed back then. And I don't know what it was, meaning the aptitude. But, yeah, I failed that as well.
Do you think having that experience within, seeing the helicopters land in your town, did that create the fascination and the desire to eventually become a helicopter pilot?
Yeah, totally. I went to SeaWorld once, and I bought a ride on a helicopter, and he let me sit in the front seat. I think I was about 15 or 16. And that was in a 206 Jet Ranger, which later would play a significant role in my life. And yeah, I just flying in that, I thought this is amazing. And I don't know why, but it was many years later that I thought I'd really give it a go, but in the wrong possible way.
Yeah, look, I think we've all had some of those ideas, hey?
Yeah.
So how long, going back to when you were in Canada, how did you get into that, the helicopter industry?
The helicopter, okay, so essentially, we moved back here, and then she wanted to move back there because her parents were very old. Mm-hmm. So I sort of went, I had a good time in Canada. We can move back there.
What was that time frame?
I would say 2 years. I'd say I was early 20s, around 23.
Yep. So you were already in Canada from, 17 you said? 18?
18.
And then until 23.
And I was there for 18 to, say, 19 and a half, maybe 20, and then came home for a while. Might have been a bit later. And I know I was there at about 20. I moved there in end of 97. Mm-hmm. It's still going back a while. And moved there on New Year's Eve 1997, the dead of winter. So you've come from Australia, like we've packed everything up, like not that we had a bunch of shit. We've been here for a couple of years, saved up whatever we can, and then we moved to Canada. And you know yourself, you move from Queensland to Vancouver in December. It's dark at 3:30 in the afternoon. The cold is like you've never felt before. You're moving from the hottest time of the year, which is December, to the coldest time of the year there.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in a house in a basement suite too, which is even colder again in Vancouver, just thinking, what the hell am I doing here? But yeah, I was there then, so I just had to stick it out. And it took a little while to find work and to get steady work. I used to work in construction, which was very seasonal, and that's when I got a job working in the bars. I made another, went back to my old ways and made up a fake resume and handed that out and got a job as a bartender. And that was really for the winter periods. And ironically enough, I got a job at the airport, YVR, Vancouver.
Yeah, right.
So I got a job as a bartender, which I was fucking horrible at it in the first. But another sink or swim moment. Yeah. I thought I'd get a job and they'd train me and everything, but I got a job in a bar where you were the only bartender. And I still remember the first drink. And the guy goes, look, I'd like brown cow.
What the fuck's that?
And I just went, maybe we make that different in Australia than here. What do you put in it here? And he said, Kahlua and milk. And I went, that sucks.
Yeah. Nice.
Right, yeah. And just stupid things. Even on the first day, somebody ordered a Cuba Libre. I remember that being in a Tom Cruise movie, Cocktail. And again, no iPhone. We can't look this up. I grabbed a book behind the bar and I looked it up. It's actually a dark rum and coke with a wedge of lime. And I thought, you fucking asshole. Yeah. Why couldn't you just ask for a rum and coke, you prick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I charged him more. Just for making me look like an idiot. But yeah, the bartending led into getting, the money was okay. And then I thought, I'll get a job in a nightclub. And that was the next big pivoting moment. I got a job in nightclubs making a pile of money bartending. Yeah.
That's funny. In the bartenders in Canada, they make bank because you got tips. You got a low hourly rate, but you got tips. And it's funny going back to where you said about the one extreme to another. My period in time in Canada, when I came back for a visit, October area, it was like mid-30s here. hot as fuck, and then you go back to Vancouver, and then I had a connecting flight from Vancouver up to the Yukon up north. I landed, it was minus 40. So coming from 30 degrees, 35 degrees to minus 40, that will put fucking hairs in your chest.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And the sink or swim moment, that's what it is. It's the depths of the unknown. And I think when you made that decision to go over to Canada, did you feel the uncomfortability as soon as you landed, or was it like, okay, it's time to fucking get some shit going?
It was just dark and cold, and you don't have any contacts. Again, it all comes back to your contacts, and it wasn't really happening for me for a while. And then work was so sporadic. It took me a lot of years to get sort of even work, because it's very seasonal over there back then.
Yeah, big time.
You'll work a lot of hours in the summer, and then winter will come, and it's like, boom, the rain comes, and you're just out of work. And when you do that seasonal work, you didn't grow up there, see your friends. It wasn't easy. The first couple of years definitely wasn't easy, and it wasn't till I got a job working in the bars that you sort of met more people.
Yeah. And
I eventually met the group of friends, which they're still mates today, 30 years later. Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah.
It's coming from the bar to the nightclub. What was that lifestyle like?
Oh, it got a little bit crazy. It worked in this fancy bar that didn't really work as a concept, but that's when I learnt sort of how to make fancy drinks. But the manager, while I was away here in Australia, got in this promotional group, which was called Ecstasy. Yeah. And
ironic, hey?
Like overnight, it just turned into the most popular place in Vancouver. But it was full of gangsters, like Asian gangsters and different people. And the money was just insane, because they used to follow this promotional group. And so on a Friday night, I'd make $1,000 in tips.
Shit.
Yeah, every Friday night. And the most I made was about $2,500 in one night, in a 3-hour period, serving drinks in tips, which was nuts.
That's nuts. Were you living in a studio at that time?
I was by then. I'd skipped over a few points. I'd got divorced, because working in a nightclub and doing construction, it doesn't warrant being married. And she was sort of going through school, went back to university, was very stable. I was a moron. And so I guess we were just very young when we got together, and by the time this stage had happened, I was in my late 20s. So we stayed together. We were together about 7 years.
Was she Canadian?
She was Canadian, yeah. Yeah. And I really was enjoying what I was doing. I was enjoying friends I was making, and I just stayed doing that. And yeah, we went our separate ways, although we still talk all the time today. We're still friends today, and it was just a period of time. I don't think I was ever a bad person or was involved with my relationships were always good. It's just I felt everything ran its time where.
Do you think your guys' time period just sort of come to an end, or was it a one bit of a moment where you're like, this can't work anymore?
She was East Indian, so the culture was hard, especially, and she came from a family where they were very invested in each other. So I'd have people at the house all the time, and I'm hungover. I wasn't the best person, and they were just very normal, and I was starting to lead a very abnormal life, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, okay. So after you guys, went your separate ways, were you starting to develop a bit more of a relationship inside the nightclub with the people you're involved with?
Totally. They started becoming your friends, and we were just living different lives. She was going to university, and I switched nightclubs, and then one day we just sort of said, I think we should separate. I was flipping houses as well. I had a bunch of jobs. I was flipping houses in Seattle. I forgot about, and it was just I was working 24 hours a day, and she said that she didn't want to flip houses anymore, and if I wanted to continue to do that and work in a nightclub, then we had to call it quits. So I bought another house.
Fair enough, as you do, hey?
Yeah.
So developing, sort of recovering and healing from that divorce, from the breakup and stuff, what do you think was did he sort of reflect on that at all and sort of take in a little bit of what the circumstances were and how you can use that to develop? No?
I was an idiot, man.
Yeah.
No, by that stage, look, it's always sad when something ends, and she was my best friend. I was sad. But I just had so many projects on. I had a fourplex at the time. I was fixing up property in Canada and the States, and I was bartending, and I had a full-time job. So I didn't have enough time to think about anything. And I eventually sold off some properties and worked in another nightclub. But Ecstasy, that promotional group, took me to another nightclub, which is kind of cool. And so then all the customers came, and thus one night I got to know my customers because they were a huge part of my income. And one night they were sitting around and started talking about aircraft and my fascination with helicopters. I'd taken a lesson in a plane once, and I'd taken some lessons in ultralights. But I watched the wings come off them once, and I never went back for the lessons. I watched two people die coming out of the sky. Oh, no. So I thought, I'm not going to fly ultralights.
Fair enough.
And they were talking about whether they could find a pilot to go across the border. And I said, yeah, I reckon I could do that. And they said, have you flown before? And I said, yeah. And I lied again, which is my classic, that's my classic move when it comes to getting into a new industry. Just fake it till you make it. Mm-hmm. I said, look, I've flown before. I must be haven't flown the aircraft that you would need, but I reckon I could do it. So somebody flicked some money over the table and said, go take a lesson tomorrow and see if you reckon you could do it. So I went and I took a half an hour introductory flight into a Bell 47J. That's one of those MASH, no
doors.
Bubbles.
Yeah, bubbles, yep.
So I took a flight in that, and I went back and said, yeah, I could do this. And that was just the dumbest thing I've ever. And it moves so quickly that within 6 weeks, I was in a 206 Jet Ranger, and I reckon I had 5 hours tops. I had never flown at site without somebody sitting there on the controls before I actually took over and just sat there by myself and looked over at that empty seat and gone, where's the guy or the girl that checks everything off, that makes sure that everything's okay? They weren't there. So I just had to and I didn't even flog one of the cheat sheets from the school to just make sure that I'd gone through everything correctly. I just tried to remember everything. And it's quite amazing if I think back on the school days that I can remember the startup sequences to start a jet engine up. Yet I didn't know what X, Y equals Z meant. Yeah.
You couldn't finish the timetable.
No. So when you put your mind to the test, you can do it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So coming on from that, what was the conversation surrounding when you got back to the bar and you said, yeah, this is...
I said I could do it. And they said, okay, well, you go get some lessons in a 206. No, I didn't get any lessons in the 206. I started in the Bell 47, but you could only do. I was doing so much work, like so many different things that I couldn't focus on that full time, and I didn't really believe it up until they said we've got a helicopter, and they actually bought a helicopter. I had a piece of it. Mm-hmm. but the piece of it came after the first flight, meaning I'd made so much money in that first flight that, I owned a piece of it. Yeah.
Did you know what you were getting into or did you sort of just throw a bag in the back and said, yeah, go to this address?
Oh, look, you there's a lot of coordination that's got to go into it. I had to pick the helicopter up first and get it to somewhere that Vancouver's got this corridor which is called the Fraser Valley, so it's up against the mountains, and then you've got the US border right there. And the place that I was learning to fly, it's such a small airspace that they can hear an Aussie on your headset, and my voice is very distinct. So I couldn't talk on the radio and let people know that who's this Australian guy flying around, because I was the only one around there at that time flying around. And I figured somebody would pick my voice. So I had to have my buddy, which is not a pilot. He was actually, I'm not going to say what he is because he never got pinged. He was a good friend of mine. Yeah. And I used to have to get him to pull the trigger and then speak to other. I was in an unmanned airport, so it means you've just got to do call signs to let them know, hey, Bell Jet Ranger, 1,500 feet northbound, 120 knots, coming into land. And he would do that. He'd stuff it up every time. But I was never good at it anyway. Yeah. So we were two idiots, in this machine.
The two stooges, hey?
Yeah. So we knew exactly it was still completely terrifying, nerve-wracking, because the first time we ever picked up, it was in a quarry, and it was in a town called Chilliwack out by a lake, and it was a very small. And as we're circling over the town at about 1,000 feet, I could see the police in a car just doing laps, and then I had to fly down there, and I could see the van coming, and I knew that was our van. So then it got to the quarry, and that was my cue. So I just pointed down, and as I swooped down, I come flying into this abandoned quarry, and I parked the wrong way. I flew the helicopter up sideways and parked with the chopper, with the blades over the top of the van. Everything's going flat out. But the road was to the back of me, and you tied in pretty tight. So if somebody was coming, I couldn't see. It was I stuffed everything up on the first one.
So you got pretty good at it at the end though, hey?
Got reasonably good at it, yeah.
What was the duration from the first flight until the end?
It wasn't very long. It's not like I was doing it for years. I was literally months, because that first ground crew in the States were hot, so they all got popped within weeks. But wow. I came in on the back of an investigation, and they all got popped. They said nobody said anything. That's cool, but it was the beginning of the end. By the time I started, everyone that I'd spoken to was already literally going to be arrested weeks later. So the timing was impeccable to be completely fucked.
Did you have any inkling when you were noticing that people were getting pinged? Did you have any inkling of, okay, this could be me next? I should fucking stop this?
You always think you're smarter than that. And this is the mentality when you're in it. One, you think you know the law, and two, you think you're smarter than them. And those two counts, when you break it down, I left school at 14, so I ain't that smart. And what did I say the other one was? Smart. And you think you're going to outsmart them. They're really good at what they do. But everyone in that bubble all talks the talk, like, don't worry about it. That they'll never get onto it. But they were onto it from day one. Yeah.
How do you think they caught onto it off the bat?
I know exactly how they caught onto it. I went down and had a meeting with somebody in the US, and they were following him. So then they just followed me. Once they got me back up into Canada, they have agents on both sides of the border. They followed. They seen who I was talking to, and it was all mapped out. But they only knew about me the day I drove down to meet this guy. That's all and he got arrested about a week later. But my contact said that he had said nothing. But at the end of the day, they all they all ratted.
Mm.
But I didn't know that.
Are you able to say what you were bringing over?
Yeah, it was just weed. It was weed.
How much?
Oh, anywhere from 200 to 400 pounds a trip
Jesus Christ.
from Canada into the US.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, wow. And sort of what was the reward after a successful trip?
Anywhere from 100 to 200 grand, somewhere in there. It just because sometimes it wasn't our stuff, or wasn't. I dealt with a broker, and that broker dealt with all the different organisations, and that broker was a Mexican, and he was a part of a bigger group, and I didn't. They keep everything separate, so I didn't know a lot. All I knew was flying. I knew the bags had all these, those tags you've got to cut off on them, and they may have different coloured tags, so it may be from different groups. So we used to always just do the border jump. I had nothing to do with the actual distribution of it. I would go onto my helicopter, it would get off on the other side, and that was the extent of the dealings I had with it. Yeah, it was weird. Because I always, you justify everything in your head. You justify, I'm only doing something illegal for 20 minutes. Like, say, I got down to about 40 minutes because I'd go a fair way into the US. My chopper would do 2 miles a minute. So about 120 miles an hour. So I'd go about 80 miles south. And then I started getting the shits a little bit because on my headset I could hear Woodby Naval Base, so I could hear F-16s in my headset because they're talking away to themselves. And then I almost cleaned up a sheriff once as I'm flying through one of these valleys like an R44 just come cooking along, and I'm not talking to anyone. And I'm like, whoa, what was that? And then I seen it was a sheriff, and I'm like, geez, there's way too much traffic down here. So
an R44, is that a police chopper?
The police chopper, yeah.
Okay.
And he said, who's that 206? And then I just never said anything. I just peeled off to the left and then picked another valley and went through because I didn't want to talk to anyone and go, go in and land. Nah, I'm all good, brother. I'll just keep trucking along. Plus, I had a full load on me.
Man, how was your adrenaline levels?
Going down?
You'd have been pinging.
Going down, I wouldn't talk to my mate. I'm just focused. I'm focused. We're heading through the mountains. You were just coming back. We'd have Sweet Alabama playing on a headset, just singing away, dancing away, just thinking, yeah, it was so much fun on the trip back. The trip down was just all business.
No, you're going to get paid 200 grand, hey?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
How many stints did you do?
I did a lot. Did a lot. But then there was a period there where we were stockpiling in the sense they had this big customer, so I was flying down there and I wasn't getting paid, and it was Christmas Eve. I think the warehouse got raided and busted, and there would have been close to £2,000 in there. And so that was a lot of money that I was owed that I never got paid for. And I should have, there was so many red flags, It was, I've said this before in a different TV show. The red flag factory was out of red flags because what I was a part of, there was just red flags going up everywhere, and I had complete blinders on that I didn't see what was coming.
You were playing a game of 18-hole golf, and every single flag was red, hey?
That was exactly what it was, and I wish you would talk yourself out of logic. Logically, something this doesn't add up.
Yeah,
and logically you'd go, but there's no handcuffs on me, and I haven't seen anyone following me. But logically, they were watching everything, and it just, looking back, and even when I did get arrested, it didn't make, even what I was saying didn't make sense. But I would talk myself into believing it, which is really weird. Yeah.
Talk to me about the day you got arrested. How did that come about?
My mum was sick, and my sibling called and said, "Mum's dying. You got to get home." And Can't remember. You know, it was early on in the year. Mum died in June or July, May or June. No, Mum died in July. No, she died in May. Yep, May. So it would have been April. I got a call. It was about 3 a.m. Mum's dying. You got to come home. And yeah, I was in a bit of shock because I only spoke to Mum the day before. She was fine. She'd had cancer a couple of years prior, but she'd had the operation. Everything was fine. We'd had a 3-hour talk the day before about real estate or something. Mum had no idea what I was doing. And so I said, I'll get home today. Well, you're in Canada. It's not that easy. And again, it was about 7 in the morning by the time I got a ticket. And I think I was on the plane, the quickest flight I've ever taken, on the plane at 10, down to San Francisco, got into San Francisco, and they held me there for a couple of hours, which was really, I was getting really agitated because I thought I was going to miss my connecting flight out of San Francisco. And I said, look, my mum's really sick, like she's going to pass away. I need to get going. And I'll always thank the US and I'll always feel bad for what I've done. And also they actually phoned Australia and they phoned that little country hospital to see how bad she was. And they spoke to the doctors. And I wish the doctors had told me because they asked how she was and they actually said she wasn't going to make it. So the US let me go. They said, on your way, I hope everything works out. And off I go to Australia, got home. Mum was sick. She'd had brain tumours. She'd had a stroke. So I was there for I had to move from one hospital to the other to a nicer one. And I stayed about a week. And it must be a week to 10 days. I was getting a lot of pressure from North America to come back, just to work for a couple of days. And so I said to my dad and my brother, and I talked to the doctors and I said, how is she? Because she wasn't really responsive. A little bit, she'd eat, but couldn't talk and was sort of in a bit of a vegetated state. So I said, this would be the dumbest decision of my life, I said to Dad and Dave, I'm going to go back to Canada. And I was genuinely going back to work for 2 days, literally lock up my apartment, like tie things up and then move back to Australia for 6 to 9 months. I thought if Mum is going to go, it's going to be, Dave. I got to get Dave and Dad through this and we got to get through it as a family. And my dad said, don't go. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but it can't be good. And I said, don't worry about it. It's all good. I got it all covered. I remember Dave just saying, big fella, don't do it. But I did. Jumped on the plane and jumped on the plane in Sydney. Sydney, it was broken down for about 6 hours. Never sat on a plane so long without it going. 6 hours before a 14-hour flight.
Fuck that.
And I thought if it doesn't get going in the next 20 minutes, I'm out of here. I'm peeling. But it got going and we flew into LA. And the pilot said when he landed, it was a very distinct call that I've never heard before and I'll never hear again. And the pilot said, could everyone have their passports ready at the door before leaving the aircraft? That in itself is strange.
Did that flick a switch at like a red flag in you, or were you just a bit?
I remember the conversation. I remember the call, and it felt weird, but again, you don't think. And then I got to the door, and as I handed the officer my passport, it was like a movie. Everything goes in slow motion. The passengers just open up. And then I just seen a sea of blue jackets like you see on the movies, like you see the DEA. But it wasn't DEA, it was ICE. You just see ICE, and I'm like, ICE. And I still didn't understand what ICE meant. And ICE meant Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. So they deal with anything to do with the borders. And all he said, there's no problem, let's go get your bag. And I just remember looking around and there were a lot of officers around me, and I thought, this is, I'm getting the VIP treatment and not for the right reasons. Got my bag, and once they get you away from the public and they get you into that room, it's like, right, buddy, you're in a world of trouble, and then your heart just sinks because they said, can we take you need to take your shoelaces out and your belt off, and that's when you think I'm fucked. Yeah.
Was it, instantly when they nagged you, was it an internal sort of just breakdown of, you're not going to make it home within the next 2 days?
You don't, at that point, you're in a different world again. I've always tried to put emotions into boxes, and I thought, I've got this to do, so I can't think about that, and so I'll put that back, and I'll get this done. And when I got in that, your world is literally turned upside down, and at this point, you're on a runaway bus that you've got no control over. You do think, but you've also got to keep yourself together, because there's no other way but keeping yourself together. So I never thought about getting home until I thought this could be all taken together, taken care of within a couple of days, and I'd be back. It wasn't until I was about 2 weeks in that I realised how, I'm in a world of trouble, because I went to LA County Jail that night. And then from LA County Jail, I spent a day or two there. Then they switched me out to San Bernardino County Jail. And you're in shock. You're in shock that you're in orange jumpsuit with Jackie Chan slippers. Nobody knows where you are. You can't make any phone calls. You got no money on your books. So you're just been put into oblivion. So I went out to San Bernardino. I was out there for about 2 weeks. And that was what's called a federal tank in a county jail. So there's no windows in there. It's just 4 walls with 180 beds stacked 3 high. And the bed areas were like neighborhoods. You got the black area, you've got the Mexican area, you got the white area, you got the Asian area, and everybody else. Mm-hmm. And you could only walk in certain parts. So time has they don't turn the lights out. They turn half them out, but it's still as bright as anything.
Yep.
So you don't know whether it's night or day. You eat breakfast at 4 a.m, you have lunch at 10, and you have dinner at about 1:30.
Huh.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. And after 10 days, I got transferred to another county jail, and it was even more remote out into the desert. There wasn't even a town. It was just this building. And then from there, I stayed there another week or so, and then I made my transfer. Then a prison bus picked me up, picked a bunch of us up. We ran around a couple of state prisons like Chin Chin and all these different prisons, and then we ended up in the desert at an airport in the Mojave, and that's when I first stepped into the feds, which is jumped onto Conair and flew to New Mexico, stayed there, Colorado, up into the transfer center, which is Oklahoma City, and that's when the whole thing started. But you'd experienced a lot by the time you got there. Yeah.
Jeez, mate, I think you did a lot more travel on Conair than you did anywhere else, eh?
Conair takes about, and I've said this before, Conair takes about 6 hours to load, and the call is really fucking funny. Like, as you're chained up at the waist, you're chained in your legs, and you're originally chained to the bloke next to me, and that guy was a serial killer. And then when you get onto Conair, it takes about 6 hours to load, and the pilot said, okay, where we're going, you don't need, welcome aboard Conair. And it's like, I sort of laughed at that, chuckled, and went, ha, 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 welcome aboard. And he said, where we're going, you don't need to fucking know. And if you need to use the restroom in this flight at all, shit yourself. I'm like, okay. So when they offered the sandwich, it's like, yeah, I'm all cool, brother.
Yeah.
No sandwich or water for me. I don't know where we're going or how long this flight is. So I just won't eat. I'm all good.
Yeah, fair enough, hey?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just different moments in time. Looking back on it, I think it's a dream sometimes, but it actually really happened. And there was a documentary getting filmed when we got into Oklahoma and Seattle. There was a camera crew there. Years later, I seen that footage because they only take you from the waist down. I almost could make out my body. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
It was so weird because I when I got back to Australia, and this is, I would say, it could have been 10 years, 7 years later. And then just one night I was watching a documentary because I seen it on National Geographic, and it was on the US Marshal Service, and I'm like, holy shit! There's either I thought it was me, and then I remember back on that day in Oklahoma where I'm like, oh, what are they filming us for? Don't worry, dickhead, they won't get your face. Yeah.
How was when you were coming off from Con Air, what was your mental notes, your thoughts?
Brutal. It wasn't, I mean, my brother contacted me about 3 weeks. I think I was in Oklahoma and I got a call from my brother, and it was weird. I don't know how he tracked me down. I have no clue to this day how he tracked me down. But I just remember over the PA, it's like, Smith, you got to go to the warden's office. So I stood next to the door, and then a couple of guards came and got me and took me up. And they said, the phone's there. Expect a call. When it rings, pick it up. So I called and picked it up. Look, knowing now, Dave was most probably supposed to call me to tell me that Mum had died about 10 days prior to that. And that would have been how, and it wasn't, I just picked the phone up and it's Dave, and I'm like, holy shit, how'd you know where I was? And he goes, oh, I've tracked you down. And he goes, how are you? And he was very concerned about me. And I said, look, and I was concerned about him because Mum, and I said, look, everything's fine here. Yeah, everything's not fine, and I said, no, we're all good. And I knew that he'd struggle with mental health. And I said, how are you? And he said, no, I'm good. I'm more worried about you. And I said, no, look, I don't want you to worry about me. I'll be right. And he said, rightio. And I said, how's Mum? And that was the decision that he wanted to make. And I'm cool with it. He said, no, she's fine. I said, is she doing well? He said, yeah, she's doing well. And we never spoke about it again. He just couldn't do it. He couldn't tell me. And that was all right, because then I lived with the fantasy. And, he said to me, don't let anyone fuck with you, and I'll be there when you get out. And so then we hung up. Yeah, it was the last time I ever spoke to him. But I wouldn't know that now. I wouldn't have known that then. And Mum was already dead by then. Her funeral had already taken place. And I didn't find out Mum had died for another 9 or 10 months. And I found that out in a letter. Yeah. How was that, reading that when you're left behind? Dad wasn't the best at putting things. He wasn't really good with his emotions. That's clear. So the first page of the letter was, oh, how you going? Everything's good in Australia, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting my hip operated on, so there's a bunch of shit about him. And then flick over to the second page, and it's like, your mum's estate's been hard to deal with. That was how I found out. It wasn't like, I've got some shitty news to tell you or whatever. It's like, your mum's... And then, I just seen that. And it was confirmation in black and white that she was gone. And they were dealing with the estate. So just, it wasn't a good time for a couple of weeks.
I think dealing with grief is one thing, but dealing with grief whilst on the other side of the world and inside of a jail surrounded by serial killers and rapists and all that sort of stuff, how was that for you?
It was weird. It was weird in two senses. You can't let it get the best of you, meaning you don't have the luxury of just hanging out with a mate or going for a walk. You do, but just in a different way, because everyone will feel it. Every single person in there has a mum and has a dad and has family. And so, you know, there was a guy in there called, I'll tell you, Richard Fable, and he was the national president for the Hells Angels, one of the scariest guys you'll ever see. He was there on a RICO charge, and Rick came in. I didn't know Richard that well. I was on top tier, he was on bottom tier. He had the best cell. And he came up and walked in the cell and, you know, just gave me a hug, and he just, you know, this will be the hardest time you ever do. No matter who we are in here, the biggest, the baddest, this will, you know, we all feel it. And you do, because you know yourself, if you've never, I had this talk with somebody the other day, and it's about empathy. And if you haven't had lost a parent, and one that you're close to, because I was really close to my mum, you'll never know what that feeling's like. And so when somebody says, I've got a friend right now and her parent is passing away and going through that transition where they're just increasing more, like you feel it. Like you feel that it brings you back to that pain that you felt when you lost yours. It's a shit feeling. And if you haven't experienced, you don't know what you don't know what you're talking about. You really don't. It's that empathy. It's that empathy and that hollowing feeling. But how to deal with it in jail is 10 times tougher, because you can't be surrounded by your family. You can't. I had some mates that you could talk about, but it's not going to do you any good, because you're in this weird white place that you don't know when you're getting out. So if you let your emotions get completely overrun, you won't get through the next day.
Do you think being in prison whilst you're going through that healing stage, do you reckon that prolonged your healing or the acceptance of your mother passing?
I don't think, because by the time I got out, like everything had changed. So I missed, and this is what I was quite angry in regards to my brother's passing, and what my dad and another person, I'll say, chose not to have a funeral for him. But my hometown put a funeral on for Dave. And this is what I feel about funerals. Funerals is not about for you. It's about for the person there. It's about celebrating them. It's their day. But not seeing it or not being a part of it. And literally the grass had grown over the little plot where my brother and mum were laid. I don't think I've ever accepted it. And it's weird to say that missing that period of grief and just coming back and everything's just done. They're just here one day, gone the next. And, you know, my mum was 49 and my brother was 30. So it's not like I was expecting it, or they were old, or there was something wrong. It was just like, bang, they're just not here.
There's this metaphor I heard about grief, and it's grief is like it's like a rock in your pocket. You know, that at the very beginning you notice it's there, it hurts, it pokes you whenever you walk, it's there 24/7. But as you go on and as you learn to grow with it, the rock's still there, but you just learn to deal with it a little bit more, and you don't feel it as much as what you did at the very beginning. And so I think having that theory of grief, do you think, you know, like you did, you haven't been able to accept it yet? Do you think you've learned to live with it a lot more?
I've learned to live with it and accept it now. There's no question. I try and help, because it's never a good death, or especially death. Death sucks at every part of it, but it's going to affect every single person on this earth. Everyone's got to go through it. Everyone's got to go through some sort, unless you're a fucking psychopath that you don't feel it. Everyone's got to go through it, of loss. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I said, why don't you get a dog? And said, I just can't handle when they go, because, you know, you get so attached, and 15 years later you got to go through this grief. But you know, when it comes to, you know, your siblings, or you know, your mum, your dad, each pain is a little bit different. There's no question. The pain that I feel for my brother is definitely different than the pain I feel for my mum, and the pain for my my father is completely separate again. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So coming from your time in prison when you had your mum pass away, what was the period of time after that until you returned back to Australia?
I'd say somewhere around 6 or 8 months. It wasn't a long time, but I'd already been in there for a while. So I didn't know a date yet, but because my sentencing wasn't for another 3 or 4 months, and then by the time I got to sentencing, it had been so long that it's just the way that the system works over there. Is I didn't have much long. I had another 4 to 6 months to go. Well, everything's undetermined, which really sucks. I had the sentence, and I remember I got out April 1st, and I remember saying to the counsellor, it said, "Oh, you'll be getting out April 1st." And I said, "Are you fucking joking?" And that was 2 days prior to my actual sentence being finished, because over there they can't let you out after your sentence, and my sentence finished on a Sunday.
Yeah.
But that's illegal, so they actually have to let you out on the Friday because they don't do releases on the weekends.
Yeah.
But then it didn't matter to me because immigration picked me up. So I just went from one jail to another. So immigration picked me up, and they fucked me pretty good, meaning I thought I'd be on a plane a couple of days later, but it was months and months later. Could be 4 months later. It was... The amount of time I spent in immigration was ridiculous. The amount of stories I heard. There's guys in there that have been in immigration for a decade.
Wow.
Because if you have no papers, if you don't have, and that's what they claim, they couldn't find my papers, my passport. If you don't have those papers to get back into your country, and you've got to apply for them as travel documents, it takes a while to do. So some of these people, their countries are war-torn and they don't exist anymore. So they don't have a country to go to, and the US won't let them out. So they're actually stuck in almost like that movie. They're stuck in the middle of no man's land. So getting back, I got sidetracked. So it was about 6 months later that I returned home, and that was even that slow process. I got flown to South Korea. Police picked me up there. I thought I was going to jail there, but I'd never done anything wrong there. So then I kept trucking through. But I got into Sydney. I was in a one-piece jumpsuit, Jackie Chan, and all my stuff was in a clear plastic bag. And I happened to run into my ex that I worked with at Sizzler all those years ago. I had a beard down to here, long hair, and she goes, Tim. And it's the worst possible time I could have run into somebody.
100%, yeah.
She said, "Where you been?" I said, "I've been on holidays in the US. I had all my shit in a career play." She goes, "I'll upgrade you to business." I said, "Please don't. Please just let me sit at the back of the plane."
Yeah.
So I flew up and then flew to Brizzy and then up to Rocky, and my dad picked me up. And I think I've said this, I didn't pick him up. He didn't say anything to me. He didn't recognise me. I didn't recognise him in that small airport. We sort of walked past each other. And that was really, really weird, because I sort of got and I thought he'd be here. And then I turned around as an old man with a walking cane. I sort of went, "Holy shit, what happened to you?" And then he looked at me and sort of went, "What happened to you?" So then we got in the car and started driving back to North Rocky. Didn't say anything. I was pretty emotional. It was because the last time I was doing this drive was a year and a half ago, and Mum was alive, but I didn't know what was coming yet. So got back and got into the house, and I'm walking around. I remember my hands being on top of my head, and Mum's pictures were still on the wall. And Dad said, "I need you to sit down." And I said, "No, it's all right. I know she's gone. I just need to accept it." He said, "No, it's big. I really need you to sit down." I said, "No, it's all." I kept saying, "No, I needed to walk." But then he goes, "Just sit down." And he first time he's ever put his hand on me, he sort of put his hand on my knee, and he said, "I got some shit news." And he said, "Yeah, David killed himself. Yeah, about 4 months earlier. 4, maybe 5 months earlier. Yeah, taking his life on Christmas Eve. Yeah."
What was the initial thought when you heard that?
Oh, just anger. like anger. You know, I think I just picked the chair up and smashed the chair. I was just angry. I was angry I wasn't there. I was, I was angry. And then just bawled and bawled. All his stuff from his house was actually, because it's really weird. It's this period of time, because he had a house, but they'd already cleaned out his house and his clothes were in the back bedroom and all his personal stuff, and his car was still out the back. Dad hadn't sold his car because it'd been 5 months, and I was just angry. And then I'm sort of trying to adjust. Over the next week, I'm trying to adjust to that. And Mum not being here, it was one of the fucking worst times of my life. Yeah.
How do you think that changed you as a person?
Oh, it puts scars in you that'll never heal. One, that you weren't here to help, because Dave had always suffered. He'd always gotten down, but I feel that me and Mum could always pull him out of it. There's been a few times that he's called me up and he hasn't been in the best headspace, and I've been over in Canada and I've said, get you a flight and come over here, and this is way before all that other shit happened. And we'd buy a house in America. You could buy a house $50,000 with no money, and we'd fix that up. Or it's just when you're going through a depression like that, Dave's sort of coming over to see me and living in North America. He lived there about 3 times, twice illegally, once legal. Just meaning he'd come over and he'd do a 3-month stint. We'd go south and have some lunch in America, come back and get a 3-month visa. And Dave would just do some cash work for me and fixing up the houses or doing whatever. So the guilt that I felt over the next, and most people still do, that if I was out, I could have saved him.
Do you think you still have periods and moments now where you reflect and think, what could I have done better?
Oh, no question. And it's not even on a weekly. It's, you try not to let it eat into your day too much, but there may be a thought or two, that you wonder what it would be like if he was still here, or if Mum was still here. You wonder how different life would be, because he was a lot of fun. He had a big heart, a lot of fun. One of the only guys that could make me laugh until I could not breathe. Very, very funny guy. Yeah.
That's super sad, man. I'm sorry to hear you went through all that. And coming from, what was the time frame from you heard that news to where you sort of felt like you were getting back on track?
I stayed in Australia about a month with Dad, and obviously I still had my life back in Canada. I needed to I called it home. Canada was my home, so I needed it. I said to Dad, look, I gotta go home. And the other thing is, a few things happened. I got my phone back. I remember when they gave you your phone back, it was wild. It's the first time you've seen your phone in a year and a half, and looking at the calls that you made. And I made 5 calls. I made Chris, Terry, Adam, Johnny, and Kurt. And it was weird. I waited about 4 days just to get my head around everything, and I made these calls to some mates. And Terry took about a day to get back to me. And he just couldn't believe it. And I told him, I tried to call Adam, and he said, I got some shit news. Adam had actually gotten killed since that time that I was away, and he was a really young guy. He was 23 at the time. Wow. He died in a car accident. And Adam was the first person I ever met in Canada, like a really good mate. And also Kurt told me that Chris had actually committed suicide. So out of those 5 people, 2 other people had passed away. So it was really just I'd say for the next 6 months I was in shock about who was left and who was still around, like who was left and who was gone and how they went. And I went and seen Adam's grave. I went and seen Mum and Dave's, and the whole thing was just shit. It was a shit period. Yeah.
Do you think you were just like playing catch up on life, emotionally, physically, for the next 2 years?
Oh, it was totally weird. It was really weird that all this had happened, and you actually think you're in a dream. And even dealing with death now, it doesn't feel real. It takes a while for it to sink in, and that's when you can grieve somebody. When my dad died last year, I got to go see him after he'd passed, and I got to sit with him and say things, and that's been a lot easier to deal with than just coming back and everyone's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's a tremendous sort of period of time, hey?
Yeah.
What was do you think, what's your happiness now? Have you accepted the fact that, you spent some time overseas locked up? Have you be able to comprehend it to a point where you can comfortably sit here and say that you've healed?
Yeah. I don't think you ever heal, but you've got a much better understanding on life, more so than other people. I feel, it's maybe arrogant, I've got a better understanding about life. Look, I still make mistakes with people. There's no question, but I've got more empathy than most. And yeah, it's that word empathy. I don't feel a lot of people truly have empathy, and when people write to me or tell me a story, I have a lot of people that reach out to me, and I read those stories. I can just feel it. I can feel I can feel it in the words. And this is coming from somebody that has dyslexia, but I can definitely feel it, and I know the people. I can tell people that haven't been through anything, because just in the way they talk and the way they act, especially when it comes to this sort of stuff or dealing with deep emotions, just be careful about who you're talking to about it, because I don't think you can truly understand it unless you've walked through it. That's just that's my thoughts on it. You can say you're emotionally intelligent, but until you've walked through this will actually teach you more than anything. It'll teach you humility, humble. It'll teach you about life. It'll definitely teach you about death, and it'll teach you about yourself. And hopefully it'll teach you about empathy, because I find a lot of people don't have it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think it's one of those things. Yeah, if you don't go through these things, you'll never be able to truly understand it. And that's why coming into this space, it's why it's making me such. I just want to change the world, because I've been through. I've had friends who've committed suicide and overdosed on drugs, and I've almost been there myself.
Yeah.
So I think I can relate to that, and in the sense of you can definitely hear and understand and notice that someone who has been through this stuff, just by the way they talk, by the way they act, the way they look at life, the judgment they bring, just their whole persona, right?
Yeah.
And so I think coming from from all the experiences you've had, what's been the biggest change you've noticed within yourself, or what's been the most thing you've implemented into your own life now that you have had those experiences?
Look, as much as, my public persona, or whatever you want to say, I have empathy. I have empathy for people, and I definitely want to put a message out there. There's a lot of things that I've done that I know, like, if you can learn from the mistakes of somebody else, and I've mostly made more mistakes than anyone that I know, and if it can help you along a little bit, it's whether it's grieving or whether it's just the struggles in life. I mean, I've dealt with the guilt about mental health. I want to look. One person can't help a million people. Well, you can, but in that in the one-on-one situation, I can't. But it's gonna. people's public perception of, let's say, somebody like me, or you look at somebody that's been on TV, or you look at somebody, a sports star, somebody does sports, or whether it's a business person that you've seen a lot of, we're all human. It doesn't matter whether you've got this magical life or you don't. We're all human. We all have these emotions. We all suffer from self-doubt or whatever. I mean, you look at I met Robin Williams once. I got the opportunity to meet him once, and it really affected me when I found out about him, because it was suicide. And this is a guy that has all the money in the world, all the fame in the world, all the friends in the world, and things still ate him up. So it doesn't matter what level you're at in life, whether you're struggling to make the bills or you're a big superstar. We all feel the pain, and we've all got to control it some way, or we've all got to learn to control it, because you can't let it get out of control. And when you do, if you do, and I have let it get out of control, you got to reach out for help. And sometimes that help is not your mate. Sometimes it is professional. I put more people onto the crisis team from the Alfred than I have in the last 6 months than I have in the last 5 years since I got to use them. There's a crisis team for the Alfred, which are absolutely amazing. They will come to your house. They'll talk to you. They'll come as many times a day as you need. And they used to, when I went through a really bad spout about 6 years ago, they used to come at 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they'll give you medication. They'll talk with you. They won't talk with you. They'll just make a cup of tea. They'll actually put your dishes away. Or but they're counsellors, but they're so good. Like, it's a service that's incredible, because sometimes you don't want to go outside. You don't want to see anyone. You don't want to open the curtains. But there are, the government do a lot in regards to mental health. And I know in Victoria you can call up the Alfred and the CAT team. No questions asked. They'll have somebody at your door within an hour, and it's generally 2 counsellors, and they will work with you for the next 3 months, as much as you need. And if you need more time after that, they switch you to the Hope team. And Hope is more one-on-one counselling, and they'll stretch that out for the next 9 months. And yeah, it's quite amazing. But when you are in that, you need to reach out. You can't just go, it'll get better. Don't let it get out of hand. Even if you're depressed, look up like the CAT team or Beyond Blue or one of these organisations. And if you look on my phone, I've got them as AA, so they're the first 2 calls. And one, I like putting them up at the top, because if I'm with somebody and they need help, it's right. Like, it's my first, it's the first number I share. And if you're just going through a shit time now, just have those numbers on hand, because at the time that you really need it, you don't want to be researching it. And look, I think everyone should have somebody to talk to. And sometimes your friends and family aren't the best people to talk to. Sometimes they are. Sometimes you've got some incredible people. But I also believe that professionals are, and that they will have something to say.
What would be the biggest thing you've learnt from those professionals or reaching out for help whilst your duration of using them?
Just that. Reach out. Just that. The biggest thing is making that phone call. Making that phone call. I'm talking to a bloke right now. I've given him the number. He's told me how bad he's gotten. And it's like, have you called them? No, I haven't. You got to make the call. I can't make I can make the call for you, but you got to make the call. Like, reach out. you will feel so much. You mightn't feel better straight away, but you feel so much that you understand the process, and it helps. It helps by talking. It helps by listening. I listen to other people, but I'm also on the other side of it as well. I'm not in that deep dark period. But if you are, reach out. And my brother shouldn't reach out. And to be honest, I believe that the advice he got from certain people, I'm going to say family members, on the last day he was on earth, because I know these people, it would have been, look, you just gotta suck it up. You just gotta toughen up. It'll get better. You can't keep, and it's all these sayings. You can't keep moping around. You can't keep moping around, Dave. Like, toughen up. It'll be all right. And they would have said a number of these things, and if you say that to somebody that's on their last legs,
it's the worst thing to say. Hey?
It's just like, that's just like throwing gas on the fire. I believe you can't say those things like, it'll get better, toughen up, you'll be right. All that is all bullshit advice.
That's the stigma of what's surrounding it all, and I know you're trying to break it, and so am I. And sometimes the hardest thing you can do is to reach out.
Out.
When I was going through my tough period, through mental health, through struggling with substance abuse, etc., sometimes the hardest thing is to actually go and speak to someone about it, because you're afraid of their judgment, what they're going to say to you, how is it going to be received. If you're at some sort of position in your life where you sort of look down upon for having a mental health, down day, then you're constantly battling with your own mind of what you think you're going to be perceived as once you've spoken up. But I think when I spoke up, when I reached out to people, that's when it really started to get better.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, we do bottle things up. We wait until we're gassed at a full size cylinder next to some fire, we just burst out of anything. And do you think there was a period of time in your life where you were constantly bottling things up, where you didn't let yourself to talk? What was the breaking point of it's time to reach out?
I mean, I stood on the edge of darkness myself. I stood on the back of a car. This is 6 years ago. I put a rope around, and I just if I step off, problems are solved in about 10 seconds. And it's a real dark period that it's just dark. And I reached out to a friend of mine who was my bookkeeper at the time and just told her, that this was what I did. And I didn't do it because I thought about it would kill my old man to have two sons that had done it. But I didn't know how I was going to get out of it either. And I sat in that car park for the next 4 hours. By the time I sort of mustered up, crying in the corner, that I got upstairs into my apartment, not the one I live in now, I moved. And I talked to my accountant or my bookkeeper, and she said, I'll call you back. And she called me back and said, there's going to be either police are going to come or you're going to get in a cab and go to the Alfred. And so, yeah, I reached out to her, and she made the call. And I'll always, thank her or appreciate her for that, because, yeah, I mean, I could have slipped off that tow bar. Yeah, I could have slipped off, but I didn't. And I reached out to one person, and that person turned out to just have all the right answers, meaning she knew where to point me. And I'd been to my doctor, and my doctor had arranged some counselling sessions, but it's even I'd call them up and they go, you can park here or you can go here, and even all that parking and just all that, it was just bullshit. Like, I couldn't deal with it. So when it had gone too far that I was going to finish it myself, the fact that the Alfred they come to your house, it took all of that away, and then you could deal with it, at home. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to a sense in that when you said, your suicide would kill your dad, that's the only reason why my suicide didn't go through. It's because it would kill my family.
Yeah.
Knowing that I'm off this planet, and knowing that I have put a rope around my neck, and if I was to go through with it, it would kill my family and the people around me. And I think that's the biggest thing. What a lot of people in the mindset, they don't allow themselves to feel that. They don't allow themselves to recognize the hole their absence would leave.
Yeah,
Jordan Peterson said it really well. He said, "Don't ever underestimate the hole your absence would leave."
Yeah, when you just said that, I thought of Jordan Peterson, and it's true. I heard a guy that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and I listened to his thing, and he said, if one person smiled at me before I got there, it's a really interesting talk. And he said he's standing on there crying, and he's seen this woman coming towards him, and if she had just said, "Are you okay?" he wouldn't have done it, and she just walked by, and then he just ran over, put his hands on the steel and jumped. And he said the minute that his fingers left the cold steel, he'd gone, "Fuck, I don't want to die." And I've heard this before, that, if you wait 10 seconds, if you're right there, just wait 10 seconds. Just think about all those things. And that's what I did. I actually waited 10 seconds. I thought about Dad. I thought about my friends. I thought about everything. And that 10 seconds feels like 10 hours. And it gave me enough time to put doubt in my mind, to go, what if, how many people is this going to affect? And so I didn't do it. And that's when the counselling started. And I think I talked to you the other day and just said, a big part of me right now, being a single bloke and not having any family, is dogs. One of my counsellors said, "Go get a dog," and I've always loved dogs. I had dogs, and yeah, it's helped me a ton. Is just having that
companion, right?
That companion, yeah. I've got 2 of them now, but they really do. It gives you something to look after. It gives you something to look forward to, especially now that especially if you don't have kids, whether you're young or whether you're older. It just gives you something to do each day, and the love and affection that you get from them is, it's off the charts.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, dogs, animals
animals in general.
They play a major role in our happiness, essentially. I've got a couple of dogs, and they are just a gift from God.
Yeah.
And when before you come onto the show of maths, you said that your father had passed away quite before that. Is that something you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, it was sad when Dad died. So many fucking... Look, I was quite close to Dad. He was suffering from dementia. I mostly went through a little bit of depression last year, and it was just I don't know, just life. I just lost a little bit of direction, and I wouldn't say it was, but anyway, and I knew it was depression. I think I talked about this, and I was getting some counselling, and then I went through. I was coming good. I was coming out of it, and then Dad passed away. And I was saying there's a very distinct difference between depression and sadness. Sadness is I'm not that it's any less, but I'm just sad. Sad can lead into depression, but depression is that hopelessness feeling. Weirdly enough, when I found out Dad had died, and I flew up here to see him and bury him, and it's weird that sadness is a better feeling than depression is. Depression's just such a heavy feeling. Sad you can deal with, so But I definitely think sad can lead into depression. But if you're coming out of depression and something sad happens, it's not as bad as, flipping it out the other way. And again, that's where you don't want to let it get out of control. The sadness, if it lingers on, will lead into depression. Yeah.
Yeah. The feeling of sadness, you can sort of comes and goes. It's like happiness. Happiness comes and goes. It's never always going to be there.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in the state of depression, you're just constantly heavy. There's no really happiness. What circles that? There's
not. And I try and say, I'm dealing with a lot of people right now, and you try and sort of say that, depression or sadness, like you just said, it won't last forever. Just like happiness won't last forever. You can't have the highs without the lows.
Exactly right.
It's you don't realise you're in the good old times. You don't realise they're the good old days until you're out of them. You just try and appreciate when you know you're in them, and try and learn from life. Try and learn from your past to make your future a little bit easier. Because there's been jobs and times in my life that I've gone. I worked on the Winter Olympics, building the SkyTrain, and it was one of the best construction jobs I've ever had. But I knew it was the best construction job I ever had. And I'd been out of jail when I moved back to Canada by the time I got this job. And it was so much fun, and I appreciated every day of the 4 years I worked up until the Olympics. I appreciated the time with the boys, the time on that job. It was a great time. So in life itself, understand that these great times, it's not a depressing thing. You can't be up all the time, and you can't be down all the time. You wouldn't appreciate the highs without the lows. I heard Jimmy Carr the other day say, "Show me a trust fund kid, and I'll show you somebody miserable." It's not, having stuff is not it's not fulfilling. Getting stuff is fulfilling. I can't imagine what these princes are like. That they have one Bugatti in every colour. That feeling inside that you get, just that they wouldn't have it. That the melatonin in your brain. That when you work at something and you buy that new car or you go on that holiday, that feeling of you've accomplished something. It's that's what life's about. It's about the ups and downs. You've got to go through them. But learn from the downs, learn from the highs. And be good to others. This has been the weirdest experience getting off maths, because everyone comes up to me now. It doesn't matter where I am. I was sitting here on the Gold Coast. I've had 5 or 10 people, while I was sitting there just reading my phone, and coming up and we know you. And then walking home last night, I had a young couple. They were so cool, taking photo. And you think it makes me feel really good when somebody comes up to me and just has a conversation, and they feel really good. But why can't you just be nice just to people in general?
Yeah.
Why can't you just walk down the road instead of walking down looking down there? Why can't you just walk up and look up? And when people walk by, why can't you make eye contact? Why can't you look and go, hey, good morning, how are you doing? You look great. Why can't we just be nicer to each other? Because you never know what that person's going through. I skipped something the other day. I skipped over something. I said hello to a person on maths about 6 years ago. I won't say who she is. It's from Perth. But anyway, she's shopping in Coles one day. And I was mostly going through the shittiest time in my life. And I remember I was shopping and I seen her. And as I went up, I said, "Oh, you're that girl from that show." The bitch never said anything. She just walked through me like I wasn't even there. I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I shouldn't have said anything, I feel like a dickhead now. And looking back, it said nothing about me. It said more about her. And I take myself for example, that if somebody's out there and wants to say hello, I'm absolutely open to saying hello, because you never know what sort of a day that person's having.
Absolutely.
So just give them a smile, say hello, and give somebody a compliment that you don't want anything back in return. You know, it makes them feel so good. I was doing a little test on myself the other day going, when's the last time I gave somebody, a stranger, a compliment? You know, like, you look really nice. Or I was watching this TikTok guy, and he's friggin' hilarious. And he would pull up in the car, and he's this older bloke, pulls up, winds down the window, two blokes sit in the car, and he goes, hey boys, can you leave us something? And they're like, what? He goes, leave us something. You guys look so good, can you leave some goals for the rest of us? And they just kill themselves laughing. But he goes around doing this and basically giving people these huge compliments, but it's a bit of and everyone just, it puts a smile on their face, and it's an amazing thing to do. And I've started adopting that a little bit, that I'll say something funny and to strangers.
That's sort of, you know, coming back to your own embodiment of empathy, you know.
Yeah.
Having empathy for someone who you don't know it.
You don't know.
Who could potentially be going through a rough patch. But your 5-second interaction of happiness, excitement, of, you know, expressing the gratitude for them even being on earth, that can really change someone's life. And it's funny when you're saying, you saw, you know, 5-10 people come up to you when you and I were walking through Burleigh yesterday. You didn't notice, but I could notice people just like looking at us, pointing to their friends, or, you know, tapping them on the shoulder, just say that you were there. And it's just like, I don't know what that's like. I probably never will. But
don't say that, mate. You can always apply. If you really want to fuck your life up.
Yeah. Imagine me on maths. Man, I'd reel on that thing. I'd have fun with it. I'd have fun with it, I think.
Maths was great, and I looked at it as a social experiment, just like they did.
Yeah,
that's why they don't call it maths. When you were there, they go the experiment. And I'm going to say this in an interview next week anyway. It's an experiment about people. It's not a relationship show. It's an experiment about people.
Yeah.
And you've got all these different personalities. Some people are arrogant, some people, you know, are arrogant. Some people are funny. Some people are, you know, but you can learn something from everybody, whether it's, I don't want to be like that person.
Yeah, but isn't that the greatest sort of type of lesson though?
Oh, it's incredible. And if I look back on my time, it was because there's certain people that you would never associate with, just because, you know, you have different lifestyles or different values and different thoughts. But this time you're all thrown in there together. And it's mostly the first time. How many times does somebody look at you and sort of each week get to critique you, and you have to sit there and listen to it? And I'm not talking about the expo, I'm talking about the dinner party where, you know, where somebody mightn't believe what you're saying, or they'll point out parts of your personality. Whether you respect them or don't respect them, it does make you think. They may have a point, they may not have a point, but you've got to sit there and listen to it. And that's tough enough. It's tough enough because generally if you go out to dinner with some arsehole, you won't go out to dinner with them again.
Exactly right.
Or you won't put up with hours and hours of somebody, this cockhead or a couple cockheads coming at you. You just get up and go, fuck this party, I'm leaving. Where that one you have to, so you definitely start to look within whether what they're saying is correct or what you're saying is, because you do find out later. It's fascinating. It is a fascinating experience, not experiment, experience.
I've definitely thought, I think watching a few episodes, I'm like, I could hack this. I probably would give it a go. Maybe not right now. Maybe a little. I don't know. Who knows, mate? The world's my oyster. I could probably do.
I would give anything in the world, and I've heard this. I don't know what Jordan Peterson says it, but Jimmy Carr actually said it. You know, if you talk to the person yourself 20 years from now, that 20-year older, that person 20 years later would give everything he's got to be where you're at today.
Yeah.
We just don't realise where we're at today is a fucking gift. It's truly amazing. And if I look back and I've got a mate right now that's going through a lot of stuff at 41, and I said I'd give anything in the world to be where you're at. Anything.
Yeah, wow.
To be 41. And I can't imagine to be your age. That's like winning the lottery. It's mind blowing to be in your 20s and live in the world of today, where it's so fast. The world is your oyster. You can do anything you want. It's crazy times. Yeah.
I think, I have those conversations with myself. I think for the most part, I put a lot of pressure on myself in absolutely everything I do.
Yep.
I think sometimes I can catch myself in a bit of a negative thought pattern where I think I should be a lot further ahead than what I am. But I also do constantly remind myself that these are the good old days, And whilst I'm 22, I have the world at my fingertips. And I'm aware of that. But I have to constantly remind myself so I stop thinking negatively of where I am in my life. A lot of 22-year-olds, I'm not throwing shade at any other 22-year-old, but for the most part, I'm going to say 80% of 22-year-olds, they're still drinking every weekend, they're still bendering, they're still doing all these things, what doesn't really align with their future self. So I think I'm in a position where I'm so grateful to have this calling and to have the space that I'm in. I know the trajectory that I want to achieve and the goals I want to achieve. So I think now I'm in this period of time where I'm constantly trying to strive for that. And whenever I feel like I'm not doing enough is when I get really hard on myself, which I think in short can be a bit of a blessing, because
for sure.
I'm not going to allow myself to go back to my old ways.
Yep.
But then again, there's also that I'm not really sure if it's being a bit naive or a bit arrogant of me thinking I should be somewhere where I'm not, because I was listening to this TikTok and this woman said, enjoy being in the process of becoming.
Wow, I like that.
And that really hit a nail in me. And I kind of look at it, it's like, I don't have, I don't have the things I want to aspire to have in my life right now, but one day they're going to be there. And one day they are going to come to fruition because I've going to manifest it. I'm going to work towards it like I'm doing right now. This space here, the people I'm talking to, the connections I'm making, the networks I'm networking with, it's all a part of the process of becoming where I want to be.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially in this day and age, we put so much pressure on ourselves that we forget to stop truly living in the moment. And I think when I find myself being in that negative thought pattern, I pull myself out of it because I'm aware of it. I'm like, okay, but this is the time to shine. This is the time where I need to make these decisions. Do I put everything into this? Which I think you should. If you have an ambition or a goal or a passion project, put every fucking ounce of anything you can into it.
Yeah.
Money will return. Sometimes opportunities will not always be there. So whilst you can, capitalize on it and fucking make the moves. And I think that's what I'm doing with this. Like this space, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It can be a lot. And
I can imagine. Yeah.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
But because I believe in it so much, the thought of failure doesn't even cross my mind. The knowing that the impact it's having and the people, like I said, I'm talking with, and the lessons I'm trying to put out there to the world and to, ease the mind and ease the stigma of mental health. That's my passion. And I truly believe that everyone does have a place on this earth, whether it be to teach you a lesson of how you don't want to be, or whether it be a lesson of who you want to be, to aspire for them, aspire to be like them, but not be them. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we are all on our own separate journey, and we have to appreciate it and, express our gratitude for even just being on this planet.
I agree. And mate, well said. That fucking tops anything I was going to say.
Thanks, mate.
But you're right. You're exactly where you are today. You're exactly where you should be right now. Mm-hmm. It's your race.
Yeah.
Don't compare yourself to anyone else. You never but we all. I'm just about to go on a rant on social media just because I'm sick of seeing people eating expensive dinners that they can't afford and driving shit cars that they can't afford. don't look at anyone else. Just look at yourself.
I think comparison is the thief of absolutely all joy. And I said this on my last podcast, on my last episode, but there's been periods of time where in this space, the podcast space, I have compared myself to other podcasters. I think that's where the biggest takeaway of not feeling like I'm achieving anything comes into play is when I compare myself.
Yeah.
So what I've had to do to cut that off is I've had to stop looking at podcast content online, on Instagram, on TikTok, whatever it is, because I know it's going to be, whether they have 30,000 followers and I've got how much I have. It's like, why compare myself to that? But I know at the end of the day, what I'm doing is so genuine and it's so real and raw. And, sometimes the podcast I'm comparing myself to doesn't have the same morals or the same pillars what I'm standing on. You know what I mean?
Who's the who do you think's made the most amount of movies or done the biggest box office ever? You wouldn't actually think it. Samuel L. Jackson. And he didn't start acting till he was 50. So it's kind of like if you compare, like you're right, like comparing yourself to anyone, because everyone's journey is different. There's that really one interesting quote on TikTok, and it says he became a CEO at 25 and he died at 50. Yet somebody became a CEO at 50 and died at 75. So who had the best life? Is because, he didn't he didn't get to where he needed to be till he was 50, but he actually got a complete life in there. But somebody started and achieved everything in their 20s, but didn't appreciate, might have died of a heart attack at 50. But everyone's journey is just so different. You can't compare. We were just talking about Matt Rife, did comedy for 10 years. 10 years, one video changed his life. He wanted to give it up. Wanted to give it up. He was just as funny as he was 6 years ago as he is today. He's just refining himself a little more. But imagine the mental strength you got to be to just go do it every single day, making $60,000, $1,000 a week, doing stand-up comedy. It's so. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle for all of us not to look at your mate or not look at online and going, they're doing better than me or they've got more than me or whatever. But you are where you are. Run your own race.
100%. And going back to that what you just said about, the CEO at 25 died at 50. There's one I heard, it relates to that, and I think goes, someone stops living at 15 and dies at 30 or something. Something like that. And basically it just means that we put so much of our life in such a small period of time where we don't capitalise onto it and make it our whole journey. Whether it be having a kid at 18, you can't do much with your life after that, for the most part. Yeah. For the most part. So I think having, that being in the space of appreciating where you are in your life and capitalising onto it is such a it's almost like a gift to what, you have to really capitalise on to be able to, continue to move forward with what you want to do in your life. And I know you're huge on mental health. We've been having this huge mental health conversation today.
Yeah.
You're about to set off in your own airplane to go travel in Australia.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, same thing is, I've always had a passion for aviation, even if it doesn't have green in the back. I've always wanted to fly. I've always wanted to fly. And a little bit of a social experiment. The amount of blokes that I talk out there, and girls, I'm not saying girls, but the amount of blokes that talk out there, and it's a weird thing when it comes to men and controlling a machine. Everyone says, I'd love to fly. I'd love to learn to fly. I'd love to, and they always think it's way too expensive. Because a lot of blokes have got kids and so forth, and bills and everything like that. So I was looking up for a pair of secondhand boots because I like buying R.M. Williams boots secondhand, and there was a plane for sale, like this little plane, and he wanted $20,000. I thought, what are the chances of him taking 15? And I thought this would be a great social experiment to see if I could buy a plane for less than a jet ski, learn to fly it and fly it around Australia. And so that's what I've done. And it is because a lot of blokes say it's their dream. Well, if it is your dream, it is possible. It's possible to own your own plane, learn to fly it. I'm gonna do one of the hardest trips in apparently, because I talked to a pilot friend of mine who works for an airline that I can't say, and he's mapping it out for me, and he goes, mate, this is going to be one of the hardest things you'll ever do.
Fuck yeah, why not?
It's going to take a month. It's about 18,000 kilometres, and I'm going to see if a $15,000 plane will get me 18,000 kilometres, and it'll be a web series. It'll be good to bring awareness to men's mental health and just those regions, because I talked to a couple of blokes. I talked to some people when I picked the plane up, because I couldn't fly it back to Victoria because I don't know how to fly. So I put it on a trailer. I brought it out the back of the Gold Coast here. So I got to go through Broken Hill and these different areas and talk to farmers and blokes that work on the land, and they've got some of these people got some hard lives. Like, when you live close to the coast and in the city, it's pretty cushy compared to, you know, the outback and the isolation and what they feel. So I am going to fly it around. I'm going to raise money for men's mental health. I've been talking to a few other companies, and also Forever Friends, a no-kill dog shelter that look after all different types of animals, because I think they really go hand in hand myself. I think, you know, if you can get out there and adopt an animal, and it does help with your mental health, and hopefully this thing will make it around Australia.
Yeah, unreal, hey? So
Yeah.
you went out looking for a pair of boots and came home with a plane.
I came home with a plane. I bought it before I saw it. I just paid for it online, and then it took me about 3 months to come pick it up. And now it does need one thing. It does fly, but because I'm going to be flying it up and around the top of Australia, it's quite hot up there.
Yeah.
So it needs a liquid cooled head on it instead of air cooled. So that's about $4,000 to get that head changed, and then I think in the next week I'll be up and away. Not actually. I was laughing with you the other day, and I said, God, I'd love to just take it down the runway once, because I've been watching a lot of videos, and it doesn't look too hard if I can just keep it in the centre.
Yeah.
Pull back on the stick a little bit, maybe fly for 10 feet, and then put it back down.
Bang.
I could go with I've never actually gotten one lesson and flown a plane. Yeah.
I think that's every little kid's dream, isn't it?
Totally, but I don't think that airport would let me do it. So
just channeling your inner child the whole time.
yeah. Oh, and you're only as old as you feel. I'm 52. I'm 52 and I act like a moron some days.
Don't we all, mate?
You know, so I never grow up, but it's the joy of life. And I know I'm in some good times right now. But they won't last forever. But I'll learn, and while I'm here, I would love to help as many people as I can, because like you, it's a gift when somebody can open up to you. I was just reading a message I got on LinkedIn last night, and it's about a guy that watched me on TV, and just it's amazing that by watching one person, I don't know whether it's the tattoos, I don't know whether I got a head on me like the back of a truck, but it's amazing that, you know, I opened up once on that fucking TV show and it related to so many people. I didn't cry for 12 weeks on the show. It was just one time. I think it was a little bit of a setup in the sense I was asleep at the time, and then Tristan came and woke me up, and then he said, we got to go out and play this game. And this game was based on family. And it's like, oh, why don't you fucking this could not be come at a worse time to play this game. But by me opening up I've gotten literally hundreds of messages about that one scene. Yeah. So it's amazing that by one person opening up, what if 1,000 blokes like me opened up and it affected, as many as it has. If it affected 500 people out of 1,000, it's 500,000 people have said that, that by somebody opening up and showing that it's okay, it would be amazing.
Yeah, man. I'm super stoked to watch it all and watch it all unfold and sort of to tie in the rest of the episode now. I usually do 3 questions at the end of each episode. The first one being, what is the worst bit of advice you have ever received and why?
Worst bit of advice I've ever received, and why? You'll be right.
That hits home, hey?
You'll be right. And it was from my father. And it's shit advice. I think it was coupled on the back of, you'll be all right, you just got to get on with it. I think he peppered me with a couple of things that day. And it was just, and I was at my lowest point. And it's just like, you don't fucking get it.
That's usually when people tip it over, hey?
Yeah. That was the worst piece of advice. So his advice was shit, to be totally honest. Yeah. Because you don't want to hear that. And if you don't know what to say and you don't have that empathy and you really don't know what to say, then pass it off to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. What's the best bit of advice you've ever received and why?
It's this Irish bloke. It was one of my counsellors, and the best bit of advice that he gave me, he just showed me some empathy. I told him my story and why I was at the point that I was at. He was one of the cat team, and then in his Irish accent, he had a big beard, he was bald, and that was fucking shit, mate. You've had a fucking shit run. But he said, I want you to go get a dog. Like that's what I want you to do. And to be honest, since I got since I've had my dogs, it's been great. It's weird, eh? That's fucked. Yeah. They love you unconditionally, you know, and they make you, even if you're not feeling the best, they make you get out and get some air because you feel guilty when you don't. And the smallest thing, especially if you're a single bloke, especially if you're a single person, just to have that one thing that cares about you unconditionally. And I've heard this thing, and I'm a big pet advocate, especially dogs, you know, why you're there. Like, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to think how it goes. You're their best friend for their whole life. They're your best friend for a part of their life. Yeah. You've got family, friends, work, and a social life. They have you. Yep. You know, that's it was kind of, I always get up the girls, I go down and get the mail, and I come back up and they're just all over me. It's like, I went 5 minutes ago. But 5 minutes to them is like 6 months to us. Yeah. So yeah, it's get it. Yeah.
That makes you sort of feel that just had a bit of extra love, hey?
It's helped out with a bunch with feeling down or depression, no question. And if you can't get an animal, then go volunteer at an animal sanctuary. They're always looking for volunteers.
Great advice, man. Last one. What's one thing you would say to someone who's going through a tough time?
Feel it. It's not that it's going to get better, but experience where you're at is where you're at. Trust me, I know it's painful, and there's nothing I can say, and there's no advice that I can say. All I say is please get to tomorrow. Just feel it, breathe, and just promise that you'll get tomorrow. I used to bite my days off in 12-hour chunks. If I can get through 12 hours, I've achieved something. Don't try and do too much. And don't think you've got to get better tomorrow or you've got to laugh tomorrow. If it takes 3 months, if it takes 6 months, so be it. But just go at your pace. Don't go at, you've been down come on, you got to get out of the house. Fuck that. You'll get out of the house when you need to get out of the house. Yep. You'll do what you need to do. If there's a pile of papers on the table and you're angry at yourself that you haven't put them away, put one away. Just do one thing. Don't overload yourself, and don't feel that you've got to snap out of this. That's the worst fucking thing. Is don't feel you got to snap out of it. We're all individual and we all travel in different time zones. So fuck it. This is your race. It's your journey. It's your feelings. You run your race and you're okay with where you're at, but make sure you make it till tomorrow.
Just do that 1%.
1%.
That's awesome, mate. Now, Tim, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. It's been awesome to get to know you a little bit more deeper than we have in the past few months. I'm absolutely stoked to be able to call you a friend now as well. So definitely this won't be the last time I'm sure you and I will come in contact.
No, absolutely.
But mate, I absolutely love watching your journey, and what you're doing within your own life is truly inspiring. You're creating a great message. We align on many levels, and look, I'm sure we'll be able to collaborate further in the future. So
absolutely, Lockie. And look, for 22 to be where you're at and doing what you're at, the advocate the platform that you're putting out is amazing, and great job. More people should talk about it. You're definitely a leader in the space, so you should be very proud of yourself.
Thanks, man. I'm really going to take that home with me. Thank you so much for your kind words. But look, to the audience listening today, thank you so much for being along with us for the past 2 and a bit hours. It has been such an insightful and incredible conversation. Just remember, if you are struggling, you are not alone. You are worthy. You have a place on this planet Earth more than you can ever be able to fathom. So if you're struggling, make sure you get out there, get some help, and do the 1%ers. Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.
See you, brother.